everybody, thanks for joining today. We're going to be having a look at women at the start of the 1900s and women's place in society, how they dressed, how they were treated, what kind of work they did, that sort of thing. And this will be leading on to an inquiry about the suffragettes. So we'll be having a look at, in the future videos, who the suffragettes were, why women wanted the vote, and we'll sort of gain the context of that in this video. So how women were treated and why some women, not all women, wanted that to change. So I've got a number of recommendations for this if you are interested in looking a bit further into the suffragettes and women's place in society. So this book at the bottom here, called Death in 10 Minutes, is a recent book that's been, oh, sorry, I don't know where that's disappeared off to, there it is. A recent book that's been released about the suffragettes and particularly about a woman called Kitty Marion, who I will talk a little bit about in the suffragettes videos. It's a really, really good read if you are interested in learning more about the suffragettes. Also the film Suffragette, I believe it might be on Netflix, it's definitely on some kind of streaming service. That came out quite recently, I think it was 2016 Suffragette came out, but that's a really, really good watch. And there is also a YouTube video on the top here, which I would also recommend watching. It's a funny clip. This is what this lesson's named after. So the clip is called Women Know Your Limits. So if you just type that into YouTube, actually, it should come up, and it's just a little comedy clip, and it gives you a little bit of a funny overview about what the state of women's lives was in the 1900s, the beginning of the 20th century. So let's have a look then at what was expected of women in the 19th century. So the 19th century, we remember the way our centuries work. The 19th century is the 1800s. Okay, so a woman must have thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages. So when we think about sort of what we expect you to have the thorough understanding of, it's English, maths, history, science, you know, it's all academic thing, even the girls among you. In this time, because women were more domesticated, they didn't necessarily go to school to learn like boys did, they needed to have knowledge of more artsy things. And besides this, she must possess a certain something in her air and manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her dress and expressions. So to put this in a word then, she needed to be feminine, okay, in a very traditional sense of the word. And this quote is from Caroline Bingley from the novel Pride and Prejudice, which was set in this time. If you haven't read that or watched it, I would thoroughly recommend that as well. To give you an idea, if I don't know if any of you have seen this or your parents have watched it, but Downton Abbey on Netflix, that gives you a really good idea of women in this time period as well. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. This is from another novel, but it again gives us a bit of context of the time. Women are supposed to be very calm generally, but women feel just as men feel. They need exercise for their faculties and a field for their efforts as much as their brothers do. They suffer from too rigid a restraint, too absolute stagnation, precisely as men would suffer. So all this means, stagnation means keeping still, being restrained, okay, not being able to express themselves. Stagnation, think about stagnant water, okay, it means something that doesn't move. And it is narrow-minded in their more privileged fellow creatures to say they ought to confine themselves to making pudding and knitting stockings, to playing on the piano and embroidering bags. So she says here they are confined to making puddings and knitting stockings, to playing the piano and embroidering, so sewing. So that's very similar to what we've got up here. Okay, so the music, the singing, the drawing. And what this novelist, Charlotte Bronte, is saying is that women don't want to be restrained to that, okay? They want actually more than that. Some women did, some women didn't. But we can see how some women were okay with being restrained and stagnant, but some women wanted much more out of their lives at this point. Things were starting to change. So the legal status of women. So in 1839, a law was passed which stated that if a marriage broke down and the parents separated, children under 7 years of age should stay with their mother, but if they were older, they should live with their father. Okay, so they would live with their father if they were over 7. In 1857, women could divorce husbands who were cruel to them. Okay, or husbands who had left them. In 1870, women were allowed to keep money they had earned, and in 1891, women could not be forced to live with husbands. Now, a good way of looking at this passage to understand it properly is to put the reverse in, right? So let's do that. So let's have a look from here. So in 1857, so if we get rid of in and we write before, okay, so before 1857, women could not divorce husbands who were cruel to them. So if before 1857 a woman was living in an abusive relationship, she had to stay in that abusive relationship and she couldn't get divorced. Okay, she couldn't get divorced, she couldn't remarry, she couldn't find happiness. She was legally tied to that man, whether he was cruel to her or not. Okay, something very different than we have today. But women were actually considered to be the property of their husband once they married, so they lost all of their freedoms. So let's do it again to this one. So again, we get rid of the in and we say before. So before 1870, women were not allowed to keep money they had earned. So as soon as the woman earned money, it went home and it went straight to her husband. Okay, he would then decide how much she got for things like housekeeping and buying food, etc. But her money didn't legally belong to her. It belonged to her husband before 1870. Okay, and one more time. So before 1891, women could be forced to live with their husbands. Okay, so only then were they allowed to live anywhere else. So even though they might not be able to get divorced, they could now at least move away from the home if they wanted to, right? So there's a lot of restrictions on women. There's a lot of control of them by their husbands. Okay, so let's have a look at something else then. So the type of employment, so the number of women employed, so these are the jobs that women had. So domestic servants, so people who worked in homes like maids, cooks, those kinds of things, 1,740,800. All right. Teachers, which we consider, obviously we've got a lot of male teachers now, but we still consider all of these roles we'll see are quite a nurturing roles. So teachers 124,000, nurses 68,000, doctors 212, architects 2. And that's because to be an architect you have to go to university, and education in this time wasn't seen to be fit for women. It was mainly men who were educated, and this is a source from the time, and it says a woman's mind magnified. So this is what is on a woman's mind. So cute little puppies, nicely wrapped chocolates, children, marriage and men, writing letters, wearing hats and buying clothes. Okay, so very, very narrow sort of aspirations a woman could have, and especially upper class women didn't necessarily work. They might have done some charity work, but they were confined to the home. All right, now something that we can demonstrate with this is what we called at the time, or what represents at the time, the separate spheres. Okay, sorry, that's an absolutely terrible circle. I'll try and draw that again. So the two spheres in society, and the first one was the public sphere, and the second one was the private sphere. Okay, and the public sphere was where men were, because in the public sphere that was where the work happened. In the private sphere was the women behind closed doors, and that was in the home. Okay, so we've got two very distinct separate spaces for men and women. Men are at work and women are at home in private, and women are expected to look after the children, do the housework, do the cooking, and when the man gets home from work, the children are meant to be ready for bed, ready to go up. He would have a drink waiting for him, he would have his meal prepared, and he wouldn't do anything for the rest of the night. Okay, so women had to do all of the work in the house with the children, which I can tell you as a parent to a 7-month-old is not easy work, and then had to look after their husbands all night as well, because he'd had all day at work and she was expected to look after him at night. Okay, so this is an early campaign picture, this one. So this one says, a man works from sun to sun, a woman's work is never done. So that's what we were just talking about there. So we can see here, after work, the man might go to the pub with his friends and the woman is at home. Obviously we've got 2 children there who are arguing, one who's up to no good, one who's probably crying, she's trying to do the ironing at the same time. And this is where the suffrage movement is born. Okay, the idea that women wanted some say over their own lives. They wanted maybe to expand outside of the home. They wanted to be able to do more than just the housework and have a bit of freedom. So the suffrage movement is the right to vote. And we'll talk more about that in the next few videos. But because of how women were living at that time, that's where this idea of them having more control over their own lives came from. So I'll just leave this up on the screen for a second, and then this is an activity that you can actually have a go at yourselves. So feel free to just pause it a second. You can just grab a scrap of paper, and then if you want to number these, then you can do a little tick or a cross, and then you can just cross-reference it. If you don't want to, it's absolutely fine. I'm going to talk through it. So I'll just give you a second now to pause it if you want to have a go at it. So if you think it's true or false, you just put a little cross or a tick next to the statement. Okay, so let's have a look through it then. So for most women, particularly middle-class women, their lives revolved around the home. That one is true. Women's money or property belonged to the husband and the man was the head of the house. That's true. Women were paid the same as men. Untrue. Women got a lot less than men, often for exactly the same job. Divorce was encouraged. Absolutely not. Most jobs expected women to leave when they got married. That was absolutely true, because when a woman got married, her job then became her husband and raising a family. Women can vote. No, not at this time. There was no pressure on women to look nice. That's not true. There was a lot of pressure on women to look nice. Women were there to look nice for their husbands. It was expected that women cared for the children. Husbands generally took little interest in or did any care for the children. That's absolutely true. Women's opinions, ideas and opinions were listened to and admired. Nope. Women were expected to be like angels, absolutely, kind, patient, caring and quiet, and domestic violence towards women was common. That is absolutely true as well, because there was nothing that you could do about it and it wasn't illegal at this time. Okay, so we'll just finish having a look at Mary Wollstonecraft. And you may have heard of her daughter, Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. Mary Wollstonecraft was what we might know as the first feminist. Okay, she wanted equal rights for men and women, and she wrote something called A Vindication on the Rights of Women very early on in 1792. So women are, even in the 1700s, looking for change because of the way that they're living. The suffrage movement actually started in 1897, so she was quite ahead of her time. And she says, I do not wish them, women, to have power over men, but over themselves. So there's a very, even in today's society, people are quite skeptical of feminism because they believe that it means that women want to be better than men. That's not what it means at all. Feminism is, if you are a feminist, you don't have to be a woman to be a feminist. You can definitely be a man to be a feminist. And it's whoever believes in equal rights for men and women, not women being better than men, just that both genders should be equal. So taught from infancy that beauty is woman's scepter, the mind shapes itself to the body and roaming around its gilt cage only seeks to adorn its prison. Okay, it is vain to expect virtue from women until they are in some degree independent of men. So that's again talking about women feeling trapped, as we saw before in the Jane Eyre quote. yeah, women being stagnant, women being trapped. And that's how women were in this time. So the ideal woman was angelic, she was obedient, she was a possession. So her possession, and even the woman herself, legally became her husband's property. So when we think about traditional weddings, when a woman walks down the aisle and her father gives her away, he's literally giving her away, because before then she is her father's property. Separate, so the separate spheres, the public and the private we've spoken about. Pale and delicate, she was expected to be slim, delicate, like an ornament, and silent. So women didn't speak about politics, they couldn't vote, because the idea was they didn't need to vote because the husband voted for them on their behalf. Okay, so in 1901, no woman had the right to vote. It was completely ruled by men in this country. Women were always paid less than men, and women were not allowed to control their own income until 1870. So things are happening towards the turn of the century, towards the start of the 20th century, the 1900s, but there's still a lot to be gained by women at this time, and that's why the suffragettes work so hard to do it. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a really good overview of where women were at this time, why the suffragettes were needed. So in the next few videos, we'll be going on to having a look at the suffragettes and what their contributions were to furthering the rights of women. So hopefully you'll join me in that video. Thank you very much for tuning into this one today, and I'll see you all later.